The hero's father died when he and his sister were still little, and then his mother told him to become a shaman because he had the potential. She made him study the religious aspects of shamanism, poetry, magic, and all that sort of thing. But by then he already knew what he wanted from life, and all these teachings were of no interest to the hero at all. Therefore, he devoted all his time to scientific research, but after 10 years, he died. The hero was run over by a car, and his heart stopped forever. It was hard to believe, but the hero was reborn, and everything his mother told him turned out to be true. After death, the hero realized that some things can only be learned through personal experience. Now he stood at the lectern, his hand on the book, explaining that today they would continue creating a magic circle in class. Some time ago, the conductor asked a young man to show his ticket. The guy showed his ticket and successfully boarded the train. In one of the compartments, he met a gray-haired man. The guy peeked into the car and noted that the man was reading a very interesting newspaper. It said that the civil war in the kingdom of Utah had finally ended. The princess's faction won. The man quoted that he was curious when all this would finally end. The guy replied with relief that the prince's faction had recently been recruiting soldiers, so he was glad the war didn't last long. He apologized for not introducing himself and explained that his name was Roger Chalichi. The man in turn greeted the stranger. The man was curious where the young man was headed, and he easily replied that he was going to Lezerwelk. He wanted to join the Seren Academy, and this surprised the man greatly. He was surprised that the young man was most likely already a professor. He explained that he needed to be proud of himself, since many people would like to be in his place. The guy changed the subject back to the war and told about a person from the princess's faction who won a victory. He had neither experience in magic nor a higher knightly rank. The guy noticed that the old man wasn't even surprised by this information, and he explained that he considered it just rumors. But the man knew that all this was true. For Machiavelli was the one who wandered the world in search of one object, and that was the name the hero used in his past life, Sir Roger. The guy also explained that he would take responsibility for the second-year students at the academy right away, and the old man couldn't even believe it. They were not allowed to continue the conversation, because at that very moment something happened outside the train. The train shook violently, making it seem as if it were flying somewhere into an abyss. The guy even suggested that the engine could have exploded, but the old man said that it was protected by magic, and that simply couldn't happen. They realized it was a trap. The old man assumed that someone probably wanted to rob wealthy merchants or nobles. He suggested that they urgently needed to hide or get off the train, and Roger said he would go first. They peeked into the corridor. All the compartments were protected by magic, so most likely the other passengers were intact and safe. But it was still dangerous to remain in the compartment if the same magical spell had been cast on them, the protection of which had been breached. They noticed that the explosion came from the direction of the third carriage, but the robbers were still not here. The old man assumed that in their place he would head to the first carriage, as that was where the first-class passengers were located. They wanted to go out through the back door, but did not have time to realize that at that very moment some person was moving towards them through the window. He broke the window, as a result of which people had to recoil. The guy covered the man with his back and ordered him not to approach and to stand behind him. The mercenary looked extremely terrible, and his eyes were insane. In his hands was a dagger, and he was about to attack the travelers directly. But before the robber could make a few moves, Roger had already used magic that threw him back. The man thought that the guy had killed that stranger, but our guy said that he had only temporarily immobilized him. He wanted to check who it was, but the man tried to stop him. Roger wanted to find out who he was and why he had attacked this train, but the robber said he would kill them all. An explosive device was attached to his chest, about to detonate at any moment. Not even a few seconds passed before the entire car was engulfed in flames and an explosion occurred. In the wreckage of the carriage, a surviving man tried to find a young guy and called out to him. But the carriage itself turned out to be empty, and there was only a hole in the wall. Sir Roger was nowhere to be seen. Our hero noticed that his mask was slightly crumpled and decided to pull it off his face. It was custom-made. It was a difficult day. The hero attracted unwanted attention, although he was supposed to keep his identity a secret. Fortunately, the princess and her soldiers were overwhelmed by triumph, and he managed to hide when they let their guard down. He took the train to Lindebrunn, but there was an accident. Right now, he did not understand why something was always happening to him. The hero threw away his mask, which he no longer needed. He did not expect the criminal to detonate a bomb. Ordinary thugs would not have pulled off something like that. Only a psycho intent on killing everyone could have done something like that. Perhaps their target wasn't the passengers, but the train itself. At that moment, the guide called out to the hero, and he explained that the train had been attacked by armed robbers. It seemed they were heading for the first carriage. The employee explained that he needed to evacuate the passengers through the last car, and he should also take care of that. But before he could finish these words, the hero attacked him and flattened him to the ground. He explained, still holding the employee by the throat, that robbers do not attack any passing train for no reason. He knew it was a difficult trick that could not be accomplished without the help of someone who knew the mechanism. He grabbed the employee because he realized it was one of the robbers and led him forward. Suddenly there was a noise behind the door, and the hero pushed the man forward. Shots rang out from the door and completely riddled the male employee with ricochets, while our hero hid behind him. He did not understand when that employee had managed to give the signal. If the hero was watching him, then it was planned. Robbers burst into the carriage and were surprised to find a survivor and how he could have dodged the shooting. The guy explained that they should not even try to kill him. One of the ringleaders ordered them to kill the hero, but for some reason they couldn't shoot. The machine gun simply didn't work. Everything was about the magic that our hero used. He disabled the weapon. They clearly did not expect there to be a mage on this train. They were closing in on him from all sides and ordered him to surrender. The leader felt at that time that the hero was no ordinary mage, possibly of the 4th rank like himself, but his face was unfamiliar to him. It would take a long time to leave the mountains, and he simply could not stand and wait for reinforcements. With these thoughts, the hero jumped through the hole in the wall. The leader could not believe that the young man had simply jumped out and made one of the people check the situation. The young man looked out of the carriage and explained that he didn't see anyone there, as if the guy had really jumped off the train. But before he could voice his thought further, magic had already pierced his head. It turned out to be our hero, who was already on the roof of the train, and no one could understand how he could use the magic of flight or end up on the roof. The leader ordered to find him. Several people had to stay here, and the rest had to go to the first car. The hero was hurriedly running along the train at that time. They realized that he was heading for the rear of the train and rushed after him too. As they were running, an explosion went off, blowing several people in different directions. The chieftain was surprised. He thought that the man was different from the mages he had encountered. The efficiency and result of his work were on a completely different level. He looked more like a hunter than a mage, or perhaps a mercenary. The ringleader realized that he was uncoupling the cars in order to escape, and he could not allow him to do that. The chieftain berated himself for not realizing earlier that the hero had no intention of fighting the bandits, and he realized that they could not leave the train and set off in pursuit of him. The kingpin said that he would remember his face and would definitely track him down and kill him. Suddenly, he felt a powerful magical energy, but did not understand where it came from. The leader miscalculated, for our hero did not run away. Now he stood right in the middle of the car with a magical shield in front of them. It was a trap. He directed all the power of his energy towards the leader and his assistants. The ringleader managed to shout for his men to run, but nothing worked. The next moment, all the people were dead. Only the leader himself survived, albeit without a hand and half of his face. The leader asked why the hero wanted to kill them, what they had ever done to him. The hero explained that at first they tried to kill him, and now they dare accuse him. The leader himself said that he would find him and deprive him of life. The hero confessed that he would have let this leader go, but now he knew him by sight. The hero proposed to the bandit to settle everything here and now. But before he could kill him, the robber was already split in half by something icy. A girl in knight's armor flashed between the severed corpse. She inquired about the hero's well-being and ordered him not to worry. She explained that the knights of cold steel were already here. The bandits in all the cars were frightened. They did not understand how they used the magic of flight in such weather. The knights fought vigorously through all the carriages and killed the criminals one by one. They called the team leader and reported that the second and first cars were cleared and the people were fine. The employee from the first car also reported that all people are safe. The lieutenant commended them for excellent work and told them to ensure the passengers made it to the next station. When they reached Leserverk station, the girl asked the hero if he was all right and if the terrorists had not wounded him. He explained that he was fine thanks to the knights of cold steel and simply immersed himself in his thoughts. Finally, the knight introduced herself. Her name was Veronica Deville. She was very pleased to meet our hero. Suddenly footsteps were heard. Some people in hats were advancing along the corridor. The girl asked them what they wanted. She introduced herself as Lieutenant Veronica Deville. The man in the hat turned out to be Remlus. He was an officer of the Leserwelk Police Department and was informed about the attack on the train in the Arete Mountains. The girl explained to him that they had eliminated all the criminals. He thanked her for her hard work. The hero overheard their conversation and learned that there was something strange in the report. The man in the hat explained that the perpetrators seized the train too quickly, even using magical power. They could not break through the defenses so easily. He explained that most likely there was someone on board the train who helped them. Veronica assumed that it was a sensible thought, and the man said that they would not detain people and were simply going to establish their identities. The girl looked back into the carriage and told the hero to answer honestly and that everything would be fine either way. The hero smiled and realized that at that moment he was clearly in big trouble. Gerard's personality had nothing suspicious about it. He passed the ticket check as required and legally boarded the train. The problem now was with his face. He definitely couldn't be given 45. If he had come under investigation, sooner or later his secret would have been revealed and he would have been hanged. There were many police officers and knights on the street, so it was impossible to escape. They were checking everyone indiscriminately. The lieutenant herself is merciless to criminals. The hero's thought was interrupted by a man in a suit. He apologized and said that he needed time to get the passenger list. He asked to show the ticket if he still had it. The guy handed him his ticket, and the employee said that Roger, Shelley, and Gerard were sitting in that car. The man inquired about the whereabouts of the second passenger, but the hero explained that during the attack, he was caught in the explosion. Veronica intervened and said that he could not be a suspect, but the man in the hat did not understand her. She explained that when the knights came, he was fighting the terrorists, and a traitor would definitely not have been able to do that. The officer finally understood the essence and apologized. They read that Mr. Roger was hired at Seren Academy. This surprised them greatly, and he introduced himself as the new professor. Upon parting, the officer once again apologized for the inconvenience caused. He offered to take Sir Roger to the academy, but he refused. Our hero decided it would be better if these two left him alone. He explained that he had business to attend to, so he could no longer detain them, and they bid him farewell successfully. The hero finally looked back and told Veronica that their acquaintance had been brief, but he was very glad to have seen her. She joyfully replied that perhaps they would meet again. When the hero had already moved a decent distance away, he mentally apologized to Sir Roger and thanked him for saving his life. He was glad that the quality of the photograph left much to be desired, and it was difficult to distinguish him from the real Roger in the picture. Now that the problem was solved, he was okay. He needed to hide and create a new identity. Suddenly someone responded to the youth, and he turned around. A gray-haired old man introduced himself, saying that he worked at the Dawn Academy. He was glad the young man was unharmed and offered him a seat in his carriage to take him to Tion. The hero, already sitting in the carriage, thought that all this was bad, for the academy had ordered a person who was not exactly an ordinary employee to meet him. He had a toned body. Moreover, the hero did not notice how he found himself nearby. Perhaps he was a knight. If the hero had fled using a silly excuse, it would have seemed suspicious, and the man would have followed him. Since Gerard was presumed dead, he was no more than a ghost in this country, which meant that if he disappeared, no one would even notice. Now he had an ironclad alibi, and until then he could live the life of Roger Chilicky. Finally, the one who was carrying him explained that they had already arrived in Tion. The hero looked out of the window and was in shock. He did not understand how all of this could belong to the academy. Her possessions were greater than he had imagined. The man explained that he was leading the hero to the lady rector. After some time, he entered the rector's office and introduced himself as Roger Chilichi. He said that he had arrived on the rector's orders. The manager turned out to be a girl. She admitted that she was waiting for Roger. It was Eliza Willow. She inquired if the hero was all right, as she had heard about the terrorist attack, and he reassured her, saying that everything was fine. She was very glad to hear that, and admitted that if he had been harmed, it would have also affected their academy. The hero did not understand how she could speak so openly about the possible negative consequences for them, but he was more concerned about the strange feeling that arose as soon as he entered here. The lad was curious whether Lady Rector had met Roger before. Perhaps she opened it at all, but she quickly dispelled the doubts. Folding her hands, she admitted that they finally met in person, for he was so tall and handsome, much better than in the stories. The girl handed him a sheet of paper and explained that she would repeat the information he had received earlier once again. The sheet indicated the salary, as well as that the employment contract was for 2 years. with food and accommodation covered by the academy. Our hero carefully turned off the sheet. The hero was shocked that the salary was 30 million dinars, converting to the national currency, and a whopping 300 million won. Our hero pondered worriedly. He thought that with such a salary and responsibilities, Professor Tian probably had quite a few. He did not know if he could hide his lack of teaching knowledge, for every first genius was at the Seren Academy. But his work here was a done deal. It would be suspicious if he suddenly refused it. The hero admitted that he was satisfied with everything and was ready to sign the contract. Moreover, he had experiences of knowledge of present and past life, and he was quite confident that he could play the role of a professor. Finally, they shook hands. He was allowed to work there for only 2 years. After some time, he was already sitting in his room. The hero had 3 weeks until the start of the semester to prepare. He did not think that he would be allocated an entire huge house. Having entered this world 27 years ago, the hero was reborn, retaining all memories, but losing his abilities. He could not rely on his parents, only on himself. He had to endure many difficult trials, but he never thought he would become a professor. Roger was from a fallen noble family, originally from the small kingdom of Quaoden. The style of the letters he found was quite formal, meaning he had no close relatives. That's why no one was supposed to expose the hero. He couldn't have found a better disguise. He thought he needed to sort out the lectures and find information about the academy, as well as explore the area first. After a while, he was already sitting with a cup of coffee and studying the papers. 2 weeks had already passed, and overall he had managed to gather the necessary information and prepare for the classes. Visitors to the cafe were already gradually arriving. He needed to go home and prepare for the introductory course. Suddenly, a girl sat down behind him and said that she was glad he was safe. She was worried that something might have happened to him. The guy was surprised. She asked him why he hadn't been in touch for 2 whole weeks, since the other members of the organization were also worried about him. If the hero understood correctly, he was being watched, and he explained that he had to check something. More precisely, they were watching not him, but Roger Chelsea. The girl explained that the terrorist attack was a complete surprise. They did not know that the rebels were planning an attack. The hero explained that he needed time to get information about the academy and make sure it was reliable. The hero now had to try not to arouse any suspicions. The girl told him that before meeting him, they had dealt with the main figures of the academy who were targeted, as well as tracked down and eliminated the traitor of the organization. As far as she knew, the traitor was fed their own limbs and the remains were thrown to the dogs. The hero fell into horror. He realized that everything was very bad. He needed to calm down, and the girl apologized and said that she should have personally made sure of this before reporting it to him. She explained that the hero has been in this world for a month already, but has not contacted them yet. The hero abruptly set down the cup and decided to play his role. He said that with her appearance, she attracts unwanted attention and only gets on his nerves. He noticed how quickly she reacted to his words, and was sure that she was afraid of Roger. He made a displeased face and inquired about the report and how many people they had taken. The girl, stuttering, explained that 31 people from the Third Order and 7 from the Second had been successfully embedded. Other members of the First Order had already taken their positions according to the plan. The hero listened to her attentively and said that if that was the end of the report, they could disperse. The girl asked him to come to a pre-arranged place next time, but he said how dare she order him around, and the girl was now terrified. He turned to her and looked at her menacingly and inquired how someone like her dared to give him orders. Sometime later, the hero was sitting on the bed in his room, not understanding what was happening. Roger was the youngest 4th-rank wizard and also a professor at Theon. He berated himself for not sensing something was wrong earlier. Roger's personality seemed perfect to him, for it was specifically designed not to arouse suspicion. Otherwise, he would not have been able to infiltrate the academy. The letters that the hero found were most likely encrypted. The hero realized that he had miscalculated. He could not believe that he had gotten himself into such a mess with his hasty actions. The hero assumed that Roger used the Quaoden language to encode the message. But he could not even think about the First Order, whose task was to infiltrate the academy and gain universal trust, and then periodically report on progress. The more the hero thought about it, the less he believed that the head of the secret society could have died in a terrorist attack. He was one of the strongest members of the organization sent to spy at the academy. Such a person should have survived. It turns out that the hero's secrets were compounded by this whole story between Seren Academy and the secret organization. According to that girl, The secret society consisted of 4 orders: 0, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Let him be unaware of anything concerning the null order, but at least he knew of its existence. The hero needed to find out who else the First Order had sent. If this person was acquainted with Roger, then there was a risk of being exposed. Now the main thing was not to get caught. The best option for him would be to use Theon to get rid of the secret orders, since a secret organization would not be able to oppose the Academy. The hero thought he had to obtain the necessary information in such a way that neither side would suspect it. The guy exhaled and admitted that it seemed he had 2 difficult years ahead of him. The next day in class, everyone was already discussing that their lesson would now be taught by a new professor. They said they had no other choice, as the former professor had suddenly resigned. The fair-haired girl told her friend what it seemed they had been talking about. The students reasoned that the new professor had a brilliant reputation, having written a pile of reports as a military officer. One of the students even informed that this professor was a fallen nobleman. They said that then there was no need to worry about the punks, and the girl wanted eyes. She thought that they had drawn conclusions so quickly it was very stupid. Finally, the professor himself entered the classroom and stood behind the lectern. He introduced himself as the new professor named Roger Chelisi. The whole class looked at him with delight and bewilderment at the same time. The hero explained that they didn't have a schedule as such yet, so he would make a few announcements before they started the main course. He explained that he would teach them spells, but the structure of the lesson would be unusual for them. They would not only study theory, but also develop practical skills. He also explained that the classes would not be held exclusively for second-year students. First-year students would also be able to attend. When the students began to protest, the professor interrupted them and said that the workload would be the same for everyone. One of the girls raised her hand and asked why he had decided to combine the courses. The hero thought that he had seen this girl somewhere before and explained that he considered it his teaching duty to allow everyone to extract something useful from the lessons. The girl still didn't understand what he meant and asked him to explain again. He said that they should not expect new good grades just because he was a new professor. He hoped that after these words they would not come to his classes. Although the hero prepared well, it would still be easier for him to teach as few students as possible. The pride of second-year students will be hurt if they allow themselves to attend classes on par with the first year. The students realized that he was overbearing with his energy, and his work as an officer had apparently taken its toll on him. The hero announced to the whole class that if no one had any questions, then he declared the start of the semester open. A little later, the hero walked along the corridors and thought that the students had no questions at all. He thought that they would at least want to clarify something or find out about him. It was better for him, but the answers prepared in advance were not needed after all. When the hero approached the classroom, he saw that crowds of students had already gathered, greeting him in 2 rows. Suddenly, a girl with pink hair also appeared on the horizon. She introduced herself as Selena. She was also working here for the first day. She came closer to him and asked if he had already had lunch. As a result, they went to the dining room together, where there were other teachers as well. One of them introduced himself as Brian. He taught how to summon golems, and the second introduced herself as Matilda. She was in charge of charms and hallucinations. Our hero introduced himself as Roger. He said that he teaches the theory and practice of spells. Only one of all the professors shot him a distrustful glance. Matilda whispered to the hero that this was Professor Chris Benimer. He was the first of them to join the academy, and he was a nobleman. The hero realized that apart from him, among the new professors there was 1 nobleman and 3 of humble origin. Despite different statuses, they were the best in their fields. In other words, there was a high probability that among them there was still 1 member of the First Order. Chris Benamor said that he could no longer stay here, although he was interested in seeing the new teachers. But in his opinion, they were some commoners and fallen nobles. He turned to our hero and told him not to act like too big a shot. Matilda made a grimace of dissatisfaction. She understood that his status did not give him the right to look down on them. The hero now had to be glad that he had company for dinner. Time passed and information appeared that they had heard of a new professor named Roger Chelli. They said he was the youngest 4th-rank mage and also worked as a military officer. No one knew whether it was true or not. The girl could not allow Mr. First Order's first lesson to be disrupted. She decided to do everything possible to attract as many students as she could to him. On this day, the hero had his first lecture. He was thinking about how many students decided to stay with him. He had specifically warned them that his classes would be difficult, and most likely the majority would definitely not come. And if it does appear, It will only be because the other classes are crammed full. But as soon as the professor looked into the classroom, he was unpleasantly surprised. He did not understand why there were so many students in his class. All 80 seats were occupied. And there were even more first-year students than second-year students. They were apparently not at all afraid to attend classes with the second year. He understood that this was some kind of setup by his coworker. Apparently, he simply underestimated the students, for the best of the best from across the continent study at the Seren Academy. It seems he awoke their competitive spirit in them. One of the students inquired whether the teacher intended to teach them all 4 training profiles. The hero explained that from that day on, he would deduct points from anyone who disrupted the course of the lesson or questioned his authority. He said that he would prepare them for 4 training profiles. These are release, elemental magic, telekinesis, and fortification. The girl thought that usually no more than 2 of them were taught. But this new professor had set his sights on 4 and, in her opinion, was setting the bar too high. The hero tapped the board and showed the students the 3rd-level fire spell, Trembling Flame. He explained that this is a technique of synergy of 7 components. She was 3 times faster than modern methods of performing this spell. The students at that time were discussing how to speed up the process of incantation in general. Flora shared with her friend that she didn't think it was possible, since the teacher had used the main structure of the spell. There were scrolls for storing spells, as well as memory distortion, but both methods had their limits. Flora thought that if the teacher used one of these methods, then she would be deeply disappointed in him. The students had a lot of questions. They raised their hands, trying to speak up. The hero explained that if you modify the finished technique, then it will become a completely different spell. He wanted to teach them to accelerate the spell creation process while preserving the technique in its original form. Finally, Flora herself raised her hand and said that it was impossible. The professor paid attention to her and explained that he had not allowed her to say anything, only to ask questions. But he decided to listen to her nevertheless. She explained to him that in order to speed up the process of creating a spell, one needs to constantly practice and be a master at it. She did not believe him, and the hero said that geniuses could have learned this but simply had not tried before. The teacher explained that magic had stagnated in its development because it had been focused on history and traditions. He did not try to say that science stands a degree higher. He simply meant that magic has room to grow. The hero explained that if no one had tried to improve it, then he would be the first. The student did not understand how he could be so proud of himself that he had lost all shame. The hero knew that it would be difficult to explain in words, and asked Flora if she knew how much time it took on average to create a flickering flame. Flora replied that everything depends on the abilities of the mage. The hero explained that she believes it is not necessary to be guided by rank. The girl said that if taking students as an example, it would take no less than 5 seconds to cast a spell. Then the hero asked her to come to the board and show everyone examples of her quick creation of magic. Flora went up to the board and with a single wave created a spell shield. All the students were amazed at how quickly she was able to do it. The hero timed it, and it turned out that she handled it in practically 5 seconds. It was hard for him to believe that she was a second-year student. He said it was a flawless performance, but still too slow. Flora was surprised by this. He explained that the best time for a 3rd-rank mage was 4 seconds, and she fell a little short. The hero explained that 4 seconds was also not a fast enough option, and the students were amazed at how fast he himself could be. The hero, in turn, waved his wand and in the blink of an eye created a magical shield. Everyone in the class couldn't believe how his spell took just 1 second, even less. Flora was shocked. She realized that this was not the technique of a flickering flame. He had completely changed its structure. The hero showed the stopwatch and said that it took him only half a second to create the flickering flame. He explained that the spell might seem strange, since the first time he used a different technique. But nevertheless, the spell itself remained the same. In other words, he used one technique to create another. The professor explained that it was necessary to create a kind of program, as if the body of the mages was equipment for castrating magical power with data. Flora had never heard of such magic as source code. She no longer understood what kind of person stood before her. The hero looked at Flora and said that she had acted unjustifiably rude towards him, so he would deduct 10 points from her. Her fair-haired friend was shocked and frightened, for it was the first time her friend had been fined. As soon as the girl turned around, the hero said that she showed perfect technique in creating a flickering flame, so he was giving her 10 points back. As soon as the professor was about to leave after the lesson, He said that he would select students who would listen to him carefully and teach them the source code. One of the guys present in the class thought to himself that he had heard those students saying silly things about the professor, but he was mistaken. One of the students laughed maliciously and said how shallow they all were. He said that commoners have no place here, and the bespectacled guy only now realized that they were addressing him. The blonde was clearly enraged. He did not understand how the guy dared to look down on the elder son of Baron Falio. Suddenly, another young man interrupted the conversation, inquiring whether this estate was located on the far border of the empire or not. The blonde man got so angry that he lit his magic wand. He did not want to tolerate the nobleman's insults. The young man approached the blonde man and said that if he wanted to lose his place at Theon's school, then he would use magic and be expelled from there. He explained that before raising his voice, it would be better to look around first, since they now had observers. When the white-haired man left, the bespectacled boy thanked his partner for the help and introduced himself as Aiden. The guy who defended him introduced himself as Leo. He was simply infuriated that he was boasting about his status. As soon as the defender was about to leave, the guy in glasses said that he would run with him. Leo explained to Aiden that he needed to find out how everything was structured in Tion, especially regarding second-year students, among whom there were those who had a solid position in society. First, there was Flora Lumos, a second-year student. He heard that she was no prize and advised against getting close to her. Secondly, she was a native of the noble family of the Exilian Empire, the third Princess Elendil van Exilian. The guy said that commoners like them wouldn't be greeted if they offended those of royal blood in any way. And thirdly, there was a student who headed the most famous company of the second year, consisting of the nobles Freit and Volberg. Leo couldn't understand whether Aiden was brave or foolish. He explained that there were a few more students he would tell about on the way, and Aiden invited him to have lunch together. The hero knew that the time in this world corresponded to the 19th century on Earth. Even taking into account the presence of magical power, science here had not progressed as well as in the 21st century in his world. Therefore, he created the source code by combining magic and science, though he didn't think it would shock them so much. When his teacher saw this development, he was brief, so he expected something similar from the students. The hero understood that he could not teach them only the source code. He needed to prepare more spells so that he would not be exposed. As soon as he entered the office, he saw the rector who greeted him. She explained that each professor at the academy was allocated personal space, which they could use at their discretion. They settled on the sofas, and the hero inquired what could have brought the woman here. He admitted that he was simply curious about the reason for her visit, and to be honest, her appearance had thrown him off balance. The rector explained that she simply wanted to check how their new professor was doing. The hero lowered his eyes when their gazes met with the rector's. He felt a tingling in his body, and it was very strange. The girl admitted that he was so calm, and she thought he would be surprised. But he apologized and said that his portion of surprise for today was already overflowing. He did not understand what the rector was doing in his office, and running into a ghost at night would not have been so unexpected. The rector explained that for the other professors, her appearance was sudden, and he was the last one she came to. The hero realized that she had visited not only him, but he did not understand why she had left him at the end. Perhaps she knew something. No matter how well the organization tries to hide, the rector of the academy will not miss any suspicious details. Perhaps she even suspected him of something. But it was unfair. Even though the hero led a secret organization, he didn't work for them. The rector explained that she agreed with his teaching methods, since there were indeed some really strong newcomers among the freshmen. She joyfully explained that she placed great hopes on Professor Roger. The girl stood up and congratulated him on the successful first lesson. She was no longer going to worry about him, since the students were left with a good impression. When the rector left the office, she was immediately met by a gray-haired man who inquired how everything went. She told him that she usually watched those who aroused the most suspicion, but she couldn't say anything for sure about Professor Roger. The man assumed that if the lady rector had taken up the matter, then soon everything should be resolved. She could not even think that he would not even flinch, twice encountering her charming gaze. The rector thought that the fact that the professor did not react at all meant that he was holding on by sheer willpower. And that terrorist attack on the train, knowing that a certain secret group is operating in Tion, she must be attentive even to the most insignificant details. What if that incident was just a ruse and the stranger took advantage of the reigning chaos to take the place of the real Roger? She inquired of Wilfred what he thought, and he supposed that he did not really know how and what had happened, but he was sure that the hero was an unusual young man. The rector explained that she was not at all sure whether Roger's words could be trusted, so she intended to observe him a little more. The hero was sitting disgruntled at that time. He did not like such personal meetings. She was clearly interrogating him. He put his hand to his forehead and realized that he had done nothing she could accuse him of. He would simply go on with his business. The boy held the register in his hands and noticed that the Lumos family was the most influential and noble family. He hoped that Flora should not have taken his words to heart. Otherwise, he would have gotten into trouble. The rector also noted that she had many wonderful students, starting with a freshman vouched for by the Magic Tower, and ending with the princess of the Exelian Empire. He thought that the bespectacled guy practicing unique magic was the one the headmaster had mentioned. In any case, the hero had to remain on the alert. Judging by her piercing gaze, she still did not trust him. He remembered that the girl in the cafe had called him the First Order. She must have seen Roger's face when he boarded the train. He assumed that the real Roger was an expert in disguise and infiltration. The hero did not understand what would happen if he was caught, and there was no guarantee that the secret organization would protect him. The hero now had to remain a professor and do everything in his power. Suddenly he heard a knock at the door. One of the employees brought him the patrol schedule. As soon as the clerk hurried to leave, Roger thought that he should start his rounds today. At that time, in the training room, one of the girls was shouting that she had every right to stay there, and if the other girl didn't like it, she could leave herself. The blonde did not understand how such an uncouth commoner dared to be rude to her. The girl with gray hair explained that in Tion everyone is equal regardless of status and origin. The blonde said that they say that so that she and others like her don't feel deprived. Everyone laughed at the girl. She understood that no matter what she said, they would not listen to her. Therefore, the girl turned around and decided to leave, and the blonde thought that she had decided to ignore her words. She grabbed the magic wand and fired a stream of energy in her direction. The energy beams nearly caught up with the girl with gray hair. But at that moment, our hero intervened. He prevented the attack and explained that the school year had just begun, and they had already gotten into trouble. He strode toward the girls, while the hooligan woman explained that it was necessary to protect the honor of her family. The professor said that all of Taeon's students are equal. No matter how noble her pedigree was, he simply couldn't turn a blind eye to it. The blonde got angry and shouted that he was a vile and fallen nobleman. The hero turned around menacingly and asked her to repeat what she had just said. He approached her and loomed over the girl like a menacing shadow. At that moment, Professor Selena appeared and hurried towards the students. Roger raised his hand, but instead of hitting the student, he put his hand on her shoulder and she got scared. He said that the blonde was right to note that he was a fallen nobleman, but they were on familiar terms, and he was her professor. The hero said that they would consider it a slip of the tongue, and he would let her go this time. But of course, she should have received a disciplinary reprimand for rude behavior. He turned to the student Renee and asked if she was hurt, but the girl was fine. The girl with gray hair could not believe that the professor knew her name, and he remembered that she attended his classes. But she was an ordinary commoner, no different from the other students. She remembered how he said that they were all equal then, and those words warmed her soul. Now the girl felt that she could trust the teacher and follow his example. She was going to study even better. At that time, the hero was already sitting on a bench in the courtyard. He had a headache, and he didn't understand what to do without those pills. He did not know why all this fuss happened right now. He almost showed his weak side. The symptoms manifested as soon as he entered the first training ground. Then he could still control it. But when he started feeling worse, he was about to leave when the girl started screaming louder and louder. The hero hoped he had done well, but his face was probably a complete mess. He noticed that he had only the last bottle left, and he could last for about 5 days. But most likely he will have to use magic and also go to the pharmacy with the prescription. He understood that he had to get in touch with that guy as soon as possible. The next day, the teachers discussed how the students said they had seen a werewolf in the city the previous evening. Professor Selena explained that, of course, it could have been something else, but it was probably a werewolf. She explained so that he wouldn't think she was deliberately seeking information about the supernatural side of the academy. Matilda said that she heard he demonstrated an unusual technique at the first lesson. Selena admitted that she could not believe that such a spell even existed. Matilda confessed that the thing was that everyone wanted to know the secret of his magic. The hero understood that if he let his guard down, he would easily get a knife in the back, and the magic tower had not yet contacted him. The other professors were already actively burning holes in him with their gaze. A little later, in the late hours, he was already walking around the neighborhood and wondering whether he should look for the werewolf in the area. The hero did not notice how a beast appeared behind him and rushed straight at him. But the hero dodged, and the werewolf flew past. The hero confessed that he had been wondering where he was being carried, but it turned out he was waiting to pull off such a trick. The werewolf said that so much time had passed, yet he couldn't even pretend to be surprised. The beast said that he and the elder had not seen each other for a long time. Hans, an old acquaintance of our hero, turned out to be the werewolf. Hans said that a dog that had recently been sitting on a woman's lap jumped on him, and the hero laughed. Hans was a human, but he had one peculiarity. As soon as an animal bit him, he immediately acquired its gene and turned into that animal. Roger explained that he had brought the antidote the guy had asked for after all. When the guy had already stopped being a dog, he admitted that he was surprised at how the guy had managed to change his identity and why they were meeting in Liesewelk, not the capital. He admitted that the hero was simply incredible, because if he were in his place, he would have given himself away immediately. Hans said that recently some guys came to the underground world, and the Order was chasing them. The hero asked Hans what their company was called. The guy said that he had to prepare. Hans also brought him the suitcase that the hero had asked for and handed it over to the guy. In this suitcase were the pills that were so necessary for our hero. The hero did not understand why he and Hans did not meet immediately, and he asked him to wait 2 days. Hans did not understand what he was talking about. Roger explained that the day before yesterday he heard a rumor about the appearance of a werewolf, but Hans said it wasn't him. At that moment, the guys heard a howl, and a real werewolf appeared on one of the buildings. They realized that the werewolf really exists. Hans explained that it seemed he hadn't noticed them, and they needed to get out of there as soon as possible. But the hero said that the werewolf would notice them as soon as they moved. However, they noticed some kind of badge on a chain around the werewolf's neck. The hero explained to Hans that he must definitely check. Something was glittering on his neck. Probably they had deliberately hung that thing on him. The hero loaded his pistols, and Hans confessed that it had been a long time since he had seen him shoot, the last time being when he had hunted for cryptids. He had a completely different personality back then, and his name was Van Helsing at that time. The werewolf noticed the approaching hero and bared all its teeth. The hero seemed completely unperturbed by this. He was only thinking about how something was constricting his neck, and he had a lot of questions. But he could only get answers by grabbing this monster, so he dodged everything like that. The hero created traps above the werewolf's head with the help of magic, and it howled in outrage. Hans, who was watching this, did not understand why the werewolf suddenly began to behave like that. Roger explained that he had directed an ultrasonic signal at him, inaudible to the human ear. He realized that the expensive silver bullet would not be needed and prepared a syringe. Suddenly voices were heard from the side. The hero did not understand why the police decided to show up right now. At that moment, the werewolf took advantage of the situation and jumped onto the roof to hide. The guy did not waste time and jumped after the beast. The police arrived at the scene and saw that there was someone on the roof. They decided to detain everyone who seemed suspicious. The hero at that moment jumped onto the train roof with the werewolf. Initially, the guy only planned to subdue the beast, but it left him no choice, and he took out the shurikens. The werewolf rushed straight at him. The next second, the hero released shuriken from his hands towards the beast. The werewolf dodged, and the hero admitted that he wanted to finish him off with one blow. He unleashed a powerful stream of energy straight into the beast's chest, but the werewolf dodged again, and this time Roger rushed straight at him. He jumped up and landed right in front of the beast. The hero swung his sword, and the next moment the werewolf's head flew off his shoulders. Hans was thinking at that time that he had almost been caught by the police and did not understand where the hero was. At that moment, the monster's bloodied head flew right at his feet, and the guy screamed in horror. He asked Roger to warn him next time. The hero explained that he had studied what he wanted, so he no longer needed the werewolf. It turned out that it was not a real cryptid. Someone had created it artificially. They had to settle down somewhere. Liesewelk was much better than the capital. Hans did not understand how the guy wanted to stay in a place where a secret organization operated and insane experiments were conducted. Roger explained that his capabilities were limited since he was still being monitored. Hans understood perfectly what the hero meant. For the hero, it was unexpected to meet a werewolf in this era. The pendant on him indicated that he was an experimental specimen. The hero hoped that after dealing with the werewolf, he would no longer get into trouble. There were 10 victims in total. The identity of the perpetrator is still unknown, but witnesses claim to have seen a terrifying beast with black fur. According to the police, this is simply a crazy killer whom they will soon find and arrest. The hero thought that it could not have been on Sunday, for he had gotten rid of the werewolf's body on Saturday already. Or were there more werewolves? The next day, everyone was already discussing Roger Chilich. Someone had heard that he had invented an amazing spell. Selena inquired of the hero whether he had already heard the news about 2 freshmen being attacked the previous night. Fortunately, they remained alive, but still received serious injuries, as if left by the claws of an animal. Upon waking up, the students answered that it was a terrible beast. The girl thought that the rumors that emerged last week were true, that there was also a victim in Leislerville. One of the professors explained that the rector came and she asked everyone to keep quiet. This was Professor of Pharmacology, Mrs. Marisa. She had been teaching at the academy for 20 years. The rector entered the hall and announced that she had called them all to this urgent meeting to make an announcement that a criminal had appeared at the Seren Academy. Yesterday evening, 2 students were seriously injured, and so far they did not know who was responsible for this, but there were witnesses claiming that it was a werewolf. One of the men turned to the rector and said that this could not be. This was Professor Hugo Borutak. He did not know where the werewolf came from here. It was not worth believing the silly story of students about the ghosts of Tian. The rector explained that in fact they had 2 victims. Hugo said that he heard her perfectly well, which is why he did not believe that a werewolf was behind all this, since both victims were from noble families. He shouted that it could be one of Theon's students, namely commoners. The rector made a grimace. She did not understand what the professor was saying at all. He insisted on his point and rephrased, asking if she didn't think it was the work of commoners. The hero thought that the Black Dawn would be at a disadvantage, but apparently he was mistaken. To incite the people to rebellion at a time when unity is needed is how the best academy on the continent acted. The hero caught an annoying insect that was running across the lock. The insect itself turned out to be a note that 3 test subjects had escaped, and if they couldn't be caught alive, they were to be eliminated immediately. The hero realized that it was someone's insidious plan, but he did not understand why he was given all these trials. Professor Selena asked Roger if everything was all right with him. He thought that this whole situation was directly related to the Black Dawn. Apparently they too did not expect something like this to happen. He understood that he could not sit idly by. He had to reach the test subjects before Tian. The rector at that time explained to the professor that he has the full right to express his opinion. But first and foremost, he should focus on his work. The rector explained to him that they had increased security and asked him to tell the students not to leave their rooms late at night. She decided to end it at that and wished everyone a good job. When the professor was already walking through the garden, he noticed someone watching him and asked the girl to come out from behind the tree. It turned out to be the same girl from the cafe who had been hiding all this time. The hero did not understand how this girl called him by his first order at their first meeting, and now she was passing herself off as a student. They moved to a cafe, and the girl introduced herself as Sedina. The hero explained that he thinks she is using his pseudonym to conceal her identity. The guy deliberately cast spells so that no one outside this magic circle could hear them. He asked the girl not to call him by his first name anymore, as it could reach foreign ears. The girl said that their subsidiary groups, which conduct experiments on cryptids using black magic and the teachings of Shamsus, are behind the recent events related to the werewolf. She explained that Shamsus's school was a group of scientists expelled from society for conducting forbidden experiments. The girl apologized for talking too much, but the hero asked her to continue. She understood that the responsibility lay with the Shamsus school, but she had heard him being asked to deal with this, so she was here. The hero said that he didn't think it would turn out that way. He explained that the situation had gotten out of control, so they had to resolve it as soon as possible. They needed to eliminate 3 targets. The hero did not understand how the girl had contacted him while maintaining her cover and arousing no one's suspicions. Why was such a talented girl still in the 3rd order, he thought. But what if she simply had no choice? Perhaps she was from a noble family. It's unlikely that an anti-social organization treated nobles well. Probably she played the role of a puppet used by Flesher from the organization. Recently, he realized how precarious Town's position was, and now he knew that the equilibrium of the Black Dawn had also been disrupted. He thanked the girl for getting in touch with him and said they would see each other again if there was an opportunity. He also said that her ability to explain had improved significantly, and he was glad to listen and hoped that our next meeting would be just as successful. The girl remained sitting alone at the table and thanked the professor. Flora watched all this from outside. She did not understand why the professor used the spell and what they could be talking about. Flora could say with certainty that it was a spell-blocking sound. The magical trace was elusive for the receptors of ordinary people. Nevertheless, she still did not understand what the two of them were talking about. The professor who was giving them a lesson at that moment said that it was over, and they were not allowed to leave the campus at night or in the evening. At that time, the students were discussing that if they were caught, they would lose points for walking around at night. Leo asked Aiden what he thought, and he replied that he thought it was better to stay away and not risk points. Leo exhaled. He knew that Aiden would answer like that. Suddenly, some girl came up to them and slapped her palms on the table. It was Tracy. The guy wished her a good morning, but she didn't understand how a morning could be good. Leo explained that it was time for her to accept the loss and calm down. The girl said that this time she would not hold back and offered Aiden to fight again for real. Aiden explained that he had classes during the day, and in the evening they had to stay in their rooms so as not to run into the werewolf. The girl insisted and suggested playing in pairs, and the winner would be the one who catches the werewolf first. Aiden would like to disagree, but Leo accepted this challenge much earlier. When the girl left, Leo explained that the teachers would take care of the werewolf before them anyway. He said that she wasn't stupid enough to go after him alone, and Aiden said that anything was possible. They approached the windowsill and looked out of the window. The girl had just turned the corner. They were shocked that she actually decided to hunt for a werewolf. The hero was already walking along the streets in the evening and thinking that he was clearly in high demand today. Literally recently, Professor Hugo asked him to look after the students of noble origin in exchange for restoring his family's reputation. The conversation with the fallen nobleman was clearly making him uncomfortable. He believed that maintaining good relations with the rector would bring him some benefit, but the hero refused. He believed that at Theon's academy there was no division into nobles and commoners, and nothing would change his opinion. He turned around and was about to leave, but Professor Hugo stopped him. The hero thought he would be exposed if he did what he definitely didn't need to do, plus he didn't want to anger the rector. Suddenly he noticed 3 students hiding behind the bushes. He sent them back to the dorm and eventually counted 20 students who had violated the rules. He understood that at such a pace the situation could escalate even further, and he had to do everything to prevent that from happening. Meanwhile, the hero reached the source water treatment plant in the vicinity of the academy. Gray hair told him that werewolves had made their way through the sewer, the only sewer in Leatherwelk where they could have squeezed through. He turned on the flashlight and noticed werewolf footprints on the floor, one large werewolf and one smaller. The paw prints led in this direction. He hoped they wouldn't trail off halfway. He stepped beyond those footprints, beyond the broken gate. A large werewolf headed towards the academy and most likely went out hunting. The hero thought that at the moment he posed the greatest danger, and he would not be surprised if right now he was stalking his next victim. Suddenly a scream was heard, and the professor decided to run towards the sound of the voice. He saw the werewolf attacking 2 girls. The hero realized he wouldn't be able to run over that fast. He snatched his wand and directed a huge stream of energy straight at the werewolf. The werewolf flew away, and the girls called out to Professor Roger. It was Renee and the princess. Both received 5 penalty points. As soon as the professor was about to leave, the princess called out to him and said that he should have made sure they were okay, because she wanted to help Renee. The hero explained that she had forgotten to think about her safety, and now she was contradicting him. At that moment, Renee's voice was heard. She asked not to punish the princess, because she herself had accidentally fallen asleep while studying. The professor thanked Renee for her dedication, but she had to understand the full gravity of the situation. He asked the princess to escort the girl to the dormitory and did not award them penalty points. While they were talking, the werewolf escaped and the hero rushed right after him, ordering the girls to find a safe place. Time passed, and the werewolf had already run up to one of the castle towers and climbed onto it. The hero displayed the magic of levitation and rushed after the werewolf right across the rooftops. He fought with all his might against the werewolf, but it did not yield to him in strength either. The princess was amazed. She understood what a real battle looked like. At that moment, the hero released a stream of energy straight into the werewolf's chest. The beast could not keep its footing and fell down the roof. The guy felt tired, and he shouldn't have used so much magical power right away. But he could not use magic while fighting right in front of the student's eyes. He needed to finish off this werewolf as quickly as possible and find the second one. But the werewolf was not dead. It was still moving. The next moment, he grabbed a piece of tile and threw it straight at the hero. The guy realized that he could use foreign objects in combat. This werewolf was very clever. A wolf was taken as the basis for its creation, so it can only determine the strength of the enemy. At that time, the guys were already searching for Tressie and calling out to her in the forest. Leo said that they should probably go back since they couldn't find her anyway. Aiden said that they couldn't know for sure. It was pointless that they agreed to this bet at all. Suddenly, from somewhere behind the bushes, they heard a piercing scream. The guys realized it was Tracy's voice and rushed into the bushes, thus bumping their foreheads with her. Now the three of them heard some sound, and Tracy said they should follow her. As soon as they peeked behind the bushes, they saw a werewolf hiding in the bushes. He was very small, and Tracy explained that she had won him, but Leo disputed this and said that she had simply found him. Aiden stopped Tracy, who would have already rushed to the werewolf. He said that he was wounded and could not move, so he found a secluded place. The guys noticed something on his neck and were so absorbed in their conversation that they didn't notice the werewolf creeping up behind them. The boys didn't have time to scatter before the werewolf pushed Leo aside. Tracy took out her magic wand. She understood that she needed to calm down, and perhaps then she could defeat him. But the werewolf was too fast. It rushed towards Tracy, but Aiden managed to protect her and threw himself aside with her. She did not understand why he had defended her, and Aiden said that he could not stand aside when his friend was in danger. He ordered his friends not to worry, because he thought the beast was simply protecting its offspring. Aiden stepped forward and thought that the reason for his anger was fear for the cub. Leo said that he could still show his true nature at any moment. The guy still fearlessly rushed after the werewolf and said that he did not wish him harm. He showed the mixture that could alleviate the suffering of his baby. The werewolf did not have time to reach out and take the potion before a ray of light pierced him. It turned out to be a professor who didn't understand why they were still here and not in the dorm. He ordered them to return to the dormitory urgently, and later they had to explain themselves to him. But Aiden stood between the professor and the werewolf and told him to wait. He explained that this werewolf most likely understood human language, so he asked the professor to think before killing him. The hero asked Aiden if he realized what a stupid thing he had just said. But the young man objected and said that it was not nonsense at all. The hero pushed the guy aside so hard that he went flying down. But before falling, the boy managed to notice the professor's gaze. The next moment he opened fire on the werewolves, and after that said that tomorrow they would all be punished. The next day, all three of them sat with the rector, wondering how severe a punishment awaited them. Finally, the overly joyful rector entered, followed by the professor behind her. They thought that if the headmistress was there, it meant they would definitely not get off with just a disciplinary punishment. The professor inquired whether they knew why he had summoned them, and Leo said that it was probably because they were facing a punishment worse than demerits. The hero explained that he was right, and they should understand how willful their act was. The rector tried to calm down the professor, since in the end, everything turned out all right. The rector asked Aiden how he had managed to protect Tracy, risking his own life. She was sure that he realized how dangerous and wrong his action was, so they each got 10 penalty points. However, she could not blame them for the actions they had taken in such a difficult situation, so she also rewarded them with 20 points each. She inquired of the professor whether he objected, and he said that he could not contradict her. When the students finally left, the rector turned to the heroine. She did not expect him to ask her to be gentler with them, and he thanked her, hoping they would never find out about his request. She inquired whether he had noticed anything strange about the werewolves, and the professor said there was nothing that caught the eye. In any case, she was grateful for his work. Thanks to his selflessness, no one was hurt. The professor pondered. He remembered that he had definitely seen something. This was not a werewolf at all, but a human being, and these experiments were conducted not on animals, but on people. The hero did not regret his choice, for had he not done so, he would have had troubles. Moreover, he was influenced by the fact that many people suffered because of them. That's why the hero had no way out. At that time, the guys were sitting on a bench near the academy. Leo explained that he would have to walk with a bandage for a few days. The girl asked Aiden if something was bothering him, but he said everything was fine. He explained that he saw some kind of collar on the werewolf cub. This was one of the reasons why Aiden tried to stop Professor Roger. But what if they were created artificially? Leo said that there is a rumor that suspicious individuals are hiding in Tion. Aiden said that he did not suspect the professor of anything, but his facial expression that evening seemed strange to him. Professor Roger clearly noticed something that evening. Tracy asked if he was hiding something from them, but Aiden said he wasn't sure. He thought he knew a lot more than they did. He thought that perhaps all this would turn out to be just his fabrications, for Professor Tiona would not do anything like that. But what if it was true? What if Professor Roger was somehow connected to all these rumors? Tracy explained that Professor Roger had told the rector about what had happened in the minutest detail. Would he have done so if he had been involved in anything? She explained that he tries not to show it, but in fact he cares a lot about his students. Aiden tried to change the subject and suggested they all have a snack. They called Tracy, and the girl was surprised at how they wanted her to go with them. Aiden explained that friends always do that, eat together and all that. The hero was at that time studying the total number of missing people in Lezervalk and the list of public gathering places. He read that someone knew a bunch of toughs who constantly hung around an abandoned factory, and that was what they needed. His friend also reported that recently several workers had gone missing outside the city, including a family of 3. The hero decided to check out this factory at all costs. Meanwhile, the guards at this factory were dying of boredom. They did not understand how someone allowed the prisoners to escape. They knew that the child had received an insufficient amount of the drug. They were going to increase the dose, but he started screaming and crying. In general, he woke up everyone here. One of the men said that no one was prepared to confront his enraged parents who saw this. That's why the werewolves caused a ruckus and fled the scene. Suddenly, the men heard some rustling from the direction of the sewer. They were about to grab their guns, but did not have time, as their heads were already pierced by energy beams. Some time ago, Hans met our hero and was surprised that he had even dressed up and prepared. He asked the hero if he was going alone, and the latter inquired in turn if he was going to help him. The guy asked how many of them were there in total, and Hans replied that there were about 40. They were getting ready to leave, so there was no time to waste. Hans informed that the hero should be prepared for the fact that they are armed. 2 wizards and 3 in full combat gear. One could sneak in there through the sewer passage. Finally, he asked Hans about that family, how old the child was. His friend informed him that the child was only 7 years old. He was still very small. The hero relentlessly pushed forward and killed one after another. One of the ringleaders explained that they had acquired a rat, while another inquired whether they should pack up and lay off people. The man explained that it seemed he was not from the security department at all. It meant only one thing, that no one would miss him if he died. At this time, the bandits tried to shoot our hero, but they did not understand why their guns were not working. Everything was about the energy shield that the hero used and broke their guns. They realized it was a mage, and bullets would not help them here. They were ordered to arm themselves with knives. But the hero didn't care. He kept shooting one magical bullet after another. One of the bandits told the others to step aside and came out to him in armor, along with a magical thing. He shot at the hero, but it did not help, as the latter remained safe and sound. The bandit thought it was elemental magic with the addition of an alchemical material. When at last 20 people were eliminated, the hero realized that someone was following him with the help of bees. He realized that they were being used as a means of surveillance. And could it be that these were the very insect brothers from another world? He decided to deal with the insect first and stepped on it, creating a shockwave. One of the brothers noticed that the signal coming through the insects had disappeared. Before it happened, he felt a vibration, the sound waves resembling those created by elemental wind magic. The boss thought that if the hero really possessed it, then they had problems. He ordered the Baron to get ready, for according to his supposed route, he should enter through this door. One of the brothers thought it was just another prank. He turned to his brother, but instead of him, he saw only his head, which had fallen off his shoulders. He did not understand how the guy had managed to sneak in here. Not much time had passed since the power outages. The villain decided that he had to strike before the hero reached him. But he did not have time to do that, since the hero had already approached him from behind, so silently and imperceptibly that he did not have time to react. The villain did not understand what kind of mage he was fighting hand to hand. He was dangerous. At that time, our hero created a flamethrower from magic. The villain immediately realized this, but he did not understand how the other had created it so quickly. The guy didn't waste time and immediately aimed the flamethrower at the leader. The bandits thought it was impossible, for he had destroyed the brothers with such ease. But that was not the end, as insect limbs began to emerge from the brother's corpse. In his hand, a mouth with teeth formed, saying how painful. He said that he clearly did not expect it, for his attack was sudden. He did not even have time to appear. Somehow he had already finished off Brino. The hero noted that the severed head did not cause him any inconvenience. The monster explained that its body had reached a transcendental state. Right before the hero's eyes, he turned into an enormous centipede. This centipede started attacking everyone indiscriminately, including its own people. The hero assumed that he absolutely did not care at all if his subordinates suffered. He rushed at the hero and tried to strike him, but the latter dodged. He created fiery energy and directed it straight towards the insect. The hero did not understand how, with such a massive body, the monster managed to dodge his attacks. How did he even manage to withstand such a powerful blow of magical force? The villain confessed that to roast him, at least a 4th-level spell would be needed. He was about to catch the hero, but he suddenly disappeared somewhere. The hero suddenly found himself behind him, and the centipede admitted that with his quick movements he reminded him of a winged insect. The hero thought that a pistol and 3rd-level magic were powerless against him, and there was no hope of using a 4th-level spell either. The guy didn't think he would have to use that particular energy, but the monster left him no choice. At this time, Hans was standing and waiting for our hero. He thought that by this time the guy should have finished. At that moment, an explosion occurred, and fire engulfed the entire building. The hero approached Hans with a suitcase and said that he had taken care of all the test subjects. The hero confirmed that all their assumptions were confirmed, and all that remained for him was to relieve the poor of their suffering. He showed Hans the drug that turned people into werewolves. There was so much cruelty in this world, and who could have thought that there was such a large-scale experiment on humans? At that time, one of the noblemen was swearing and throwing dishes at his maids. He called them fools, undeserving of a single kopeck. The old man was angry because he had invested in this business more money than they could dream of, and yet they couldn't even keep track of the experiment subjects. Soon he was supposed to receive the results of the study, and then he would be able to proceed to the next stage. In addition to restoring his former appearance, the treatment was supposed to make him stronger and more perfect. Suddenly, the old man was called out to by our hero, who was standing on the balcony. The old man did not have time to ask him who he was, as the young man forcefully slammed him to the floor. He was about to call security, but the guy explained that no matter how much he called, they still wouldn't hear, because the hero had set up a sound barrier around the perimeter of the room. Then the hero asked the old man to imagine a 7-year-old child who had survived. But he, like his parents, had to face this monstrous reality. A child looking into the eyes of his killer with a smile before death, and his smile read gratitude. He asked the old man how he thought the person who had no other choice but to burn his family to ashes along with himself felt at that moment. The old man laughed. He realized that it was he who got rid of the escaped test subjects and offered to let him go to negotiate. The old man said that he had a great misfortune, that he had simply gotten rid of a bunch of useless fools. He told how they gave them the opportunity to do something useful for once in their miserable lives, a chance to serve for the benefit of human development. The hero said that he had heard more than enough and injected the liquid directly into the man's throat with a syringe. The hero explained that this was precisely why he now had not a shred of anger in him. The guy told how he watched the recording of his research and was able to say that they are quite curious. It turns out that even a small dose of the drug can turn a person into a werewolf. The man gradually began to turn into a werewolf or something similar to it. The hero thought that no matter how hard he tried to convey his feelings to him, he still wouldn't understand. So instead, he decided to make him experience what they had experienced. The security guards had already rushed to the noise coming from Mr. Rickson's office at that time. They saw a huge monster appear in the office instead of him, but they did not understand where it had come from. They realized they needed to subdue the beast and used fire magic against it. At that time, Hans told the hero that he had been trying to get to that place for so long, and could he look around first. The hero explained that next time a more suitable personality would be needed for cover. The next day, journalists rushed to the scene. They were told that the man was nowhere to be found, but instead of him, there was a monster. One of the journalists explained that the mages dealt with the monster. He heard that it took them an hour to burn the creature. At that moment, the National Security Agency arrived on the scene, along with the Nightly Order of Night Snakes led by the rector. They did not understand how the situation could be so serious, and the news was sensational. The rector approached the guards and ordered them to open the gates. The guards were frightened and hastily obeyed her order. The rector was greeted by Senior Inspector Teveron. She explained that from that moment on, the case fell under the jurisdiction of the National Security Agency, and they had to provide all evidence and information. Finally, the rector and her colleagues entered the room where it all happened. The girl who worked for the rector confessed how difficult it was to constantly remain serious. She suggested that since no one was around, she could forget about her image for a bit. But the guy objected. He said that they were night snakes and always had to keep a straight face. The rector tried to calm him down. She explained that one simply needs to try to maintain a confident appearance under any circumstances. She told how, according to rumors, Belford was not only involved in dark magic, but was also involved in hunting for cryptids, so the monster's intervention could not be called a mere coincidence. The girl informed that the monster's body burned down to charred bones. They decided to inspect the room and find something else suspicious in it. The rector noticed how the painting was slightly shifted, but the wall remained clean. The rector informed that she had found a niche in the wall, but it was empty. Based on the width and location, it could be assumed that there was a safe there. There were too many components to call it a coincidence, and the rector concluded that there was someone else who took part in Belford's murder. The only one of her acquaintances who could pull off something like that is Arsène Lupin. The rector was explained that the explosion at the abandoned factory had occurred shortly before Belford's death. She was sure that there they would definitely find some clues. At this time, the hero was alone and thought that these side effects would soon kill him. True magical power requires too much energy expenditure. If it weren't for those pills that helped conserve magic, it would have been much worse for him. At least he burned all the werewolves in the laboratory, getting rid of the evidence, and now the hero could forget about this situation. Although there was still someone else he had to deal with, and that was Aiden. He did not retreat until the very end, blocking his path, and the hero must have been struggling to contain his emotions. Aiden could notice something since he was standing closest. The hero immediately betrayed the werewolves to the fire, but a mere second could have been enough for him to see what he should not have. The hero sincerely hoped that everything would work out, because it was not a fact that Aiden would remain silent. And then the hero will have no choice but to kill Aiden. On the other hand, he thought that he could not kill the student Tion as it was too risky. Besides, Aiden was no ordinary student. He was under the watchful eye of the rector, and if anything happened to him, she would immediately come under suspicion. The hero wearily sank onto the bed and thought that now he should focus on resting and healing his wounds. He suddenly remembered that this guy had written that in his childhood, a wandering magician had taught him a special magic technique. After a while, the rector, along with his soldiers, arrived at the scene of the fire. They explained that everything had burned to the ground and it would be difficult to find anything. They did not understand where the fire could have started at the abandoned factory. Perhaps it was only officially considered abandoned, but in reality it continued to be used. The girl assumed that dark mages or cryptids conducted their research here, but when they were caught, they got rid of the evidence. The rector knew about this incident, but did not think that it would concern their case. Perhaps the arsonist wanted not just to start a fire, but did everything to get rid of the evidence. Either it was a normal coincidence of circumstances, which too many factors pointed to. Cloyd said that there had been no unusual cases before, except for the werewolves a few days ago. He was found at the Seren Academy, as he had escaped through the sewers. The rector explained that the security there was weak, so she was not surprised. The guy said that he wounded 3 students, but one of the professors dealt with him. He also said that no remains were found, they all burned. The rector thought that the burned-down factory, the burned werewolves, and one similarity were not enough to link these 2 cases. But if she found out that the same person was behind them, she would see it as a threat to the Empire. At that time, Renee went to the lesson, and she did not know where to sit, for there was not a single free seat. Suddenly, the princess herself waved to her and inquired about her well-being. Renee wished her good morning and said that everything was fine with her, but she herself wondered why she was so unlucky. They used to not get along with the girl, but now she said to call her older sister since we are all equal in that. Renee was clearly ill at ease. She had a feeling that if she let her guard down, something would happen immediately. At that moment, the professor appeared and said that today he would tell them about the peculiarities of manifestation. She was used more often than other methods, and she was the most significant of all, the foundation of all foundations. The professor explained that this method would help increase their elemental power from 20 to 80%. The students did not think it was possible. Nevertheless, they thought the professor would definitely not lie to them. The hero asked Anthony what attributes of elemental magic he uses, and he said water and ice and also plants. He asked him to demonstrate the one he was most confident in, and the guy ignited energy in his hands. The professor said that it was not bad, but very far from ideal, and the guy was very upset. He even shed a few tears. The professor ordered them to closely watch his actions and ignited the sphere in his hands. The students understood that this was a completely different level. They could not believe how he did it, using the same kind of magic. The professor depicted before them the 4 basic elements from which everything began. Compared to the 10 elements they use now, they looked too simple. He asked if anyone knew what had caused such a strong leap in their development. Flora raised her hand and explained that horses were used as weapons against people, to burn them, and she was right. The professor also explained that the purpose of elemental attributes can change depending on human actions. He said that to fight for a better world, it was with this attitude that they should begin to master it. He ordered Joseph to focus on the flow, for as a second-year student, he was too inexperienced in releasing magical power. He noticed that Aiden was doing nothing and approached him. The hero did not understand what was happening to him and why he was behaving that way. Aiden explained that he felt so awkward because he had not yet practiced elemental manifestation. The hero thought that Theon's special student did not possess basic knowledge, even though he was admitted as an exception. He could not take responsibility for a person who needed everything explained from scratch, and he, of course, did not care whether he fell behind the others or not. Finally, the hero gave in and said that he would teach him, for he could not leave a student in need of help. He asked him to accumulate magical energy and think about how to convert it into an attribute, that is, into fire. The hero explained that thinking about the goal is not enough. He must allow his senses to open up. Aiden remembered how 8 years ago, during a snowstorm, there was the bitter smell of hot logs and charcoal, as well as the aroma of ragu in the cauldron. He remembered the whining of his sisters and his mother's silence, his father's smile when he returned home. Food was scarce, and the cold wind penetrated through the fabric of worn clothes. And that harsh winter, the fire blazing in the fireplace soothed him. Finally, Aiden succeeded. It was a feeling that arose along with a moment from the past. The professor praised him and explained that the fire in his hands was an attribute, an image that he had visualized in his mind. The professor said that he was now confident that the students had already understood that this was the very method he had been talking about. For him, it was important that a true mage put something unique into his spells. He explained that a true wizard must put something unique into his spell. The guy asked the students to engage all 5 senses, and the students finally started to get it. At that moment, Flora exhaled. She thought she had mastered it all long ago and thought she would learn something new today. She did not understand why the professor had spent so much time on some freshman and even praised him for simply manifesting an attribute of elemental magic. Flora decided to show the professor what she was capable of and how he would shower her with compliments. The girl thought that by adding wind magic technique, she could create a whirlpool. But something went wrong, and the energy grew. She had to stop it. Otherwise, an explosion would be inevitable. The students shouted that they needed to run and escape quickly, as the energy was growing. The girl thought it was the end, but the professor approached her and ordered her not to give up, to control the flow of her magical power. The hero said that he would help her, for if she stopped now, her magic would simply dissipate. Flora realized that he was right, and she had to see it through to the end. The girl understood that the looks directed at her always expressed only envy and jealousy, but she paid no attention to them, continuing to move forward. However, there was something she could not bear. It was her father's cold gaze. He looked as if she didn't exist. On the day of the fine, following the humiliations, she was first overwhelmed by a feeling of defeat, and it hurt the girl so much that even such unwanted childhood memories returned to her. Let her not see the expression on his face, but she knew that he was looking exactly the same way as her father once did. The girl noticed that the waves had stabilized, and she finally succeeded. The professor leaned towards her and explained that she had acted very rashly. It's not that she tried something new and failed. He said it's normal and everyone makes mistakes. But the thing was that she put other students at risk. Flora exclaimed that she did not deny that she had gone too far trying to incorporate a third element as well. But this concerned ice and flame. The combination turned out perfect. The hero still did not understand what she intended to achieve by this. The girl saw how, using the ability of fire to cover large distances and the cold of ice, he combined them into one spell. Using the same elements, he reworked them into something more practical, and she failed completely again. The professor turned to her again and said that he did not reproach her for a lack of mastery. The hero put his hand on her shoulder and explained that in his view she was simply playing to the gallery and advised her to choose another goal for her own good. Flora thought that in his eyes there was neither reproach nor mockery, but only sincere concern, which was not even in the gaze of her own father. Her head ached from using a large amount of mana, and her friend hurried to help her. She wondered how the professor felt at that moment, since he had expended much more effort than she had. His head was about to burst. It's a good thing he managed to take the pills. He remembered how at the time the teacher had also scolded him severely after a similar prank. The hero knew that Flora had to cope with this. The rector mentioned that this year many talented people, the so-called golden generation, enrolled in the academy. He noticed Renee and realized that something was wrong. She failed to exhibit an elementary attribute, or rather, it simply did not exist at all. The professor explained that the classes were over for today, and as an assignment, he asked them to review everything they had covered today. And he asked Renee to follow him into the office. When they were already in the office, the hero asked her to wait here. Renee did not understand why he had called her. Did he want to conduct a personal interview, or was he going to fire her? At that moment, the professor had already returned with some papers in his hands. She thought it might be a statement of expulsion and asked him not to expel her, as she would try hard. But the hero merely handed her the book and explained that it was for her self-study. She was supposed to learn from it. This was a textbook on non-elementary magic. The hero said that he knew one person, and this book is the result of her many years of research. The hero inquired what Renee thought about a person who could work with only one element, and Renee replied that he was most likely talentless. He also explained that only one element, incredibly talented in the field of this particular element, is capable of practicing magic. He said that they can influence natural phenomena, such professionals they are. He told Renee not to worry, for the world and magic are constantly changing. A little later, our hero was already thinking about how it was unexpected to meet a student practicing non-elemental magic. However, he had the opportunity to look into the eyes of a person capable of distinguishing good from evil, although she is still at the very beginning of the path and does not realize it. The next day, Aiden had almost mastered the technique the professor had shown him, and it proved to be very useful. When the professor used magic, his gaze showed kindness and wisdom. He thought that it could not be that a person who loved magic turned out to be a villain. Aiden did not understand why so many guys had gathered around this guy. He must have been popular in Tion. Suddenly, a blond man appeared on the horizon. He claimed that Aiden, unable to materialize his own element, was still trying his best. Leo was about to stand up for his friend, but Aiden said he would handle it himself. He had no idea what was so annoying to Giovanna, but he apologized to him. Jivan, in turn, offered him to forget everything as soon as he got down on his knees. But Aiden approached the guy and told him not to dare touch his friends. His gaze was cold and malicious. Jivan immediately after that decided to challenge Aiden to a duel, and Aiden accepted the challenge. But he said that if he wins, he will apologize to Leo and Tacy. At that moment, the professor appeared and asked to explain what was going on there. He thought that Aiden had gotten himself into something again, as if he were the main character from some manhwa. Bloden explained that it would be an honest duel. He challenged his opponent to a duel, and the opponent agreed. The professor explained that this would not do, and a magical duel between first years was a bad thing. He noticed a guy standing in the corner surrounded by other students, and it seems the hero realized that the blond man was doing everything to impress that student. The hero said that he would not punish them for what had not happened, so he ordered them to return to their room. At that moment, another professor appeared and inquired whether he was exceeding his authority by any chance. He explained that the teacher had no right to interfere in a duel arranged on a mutual basis. The hero turned to the guys and asked if they agreed. Both guys shouted that they didn't mind. The professor inquired of the hero whether he wished to make a wager. He understood that it was foolish to stake the outcome on a duel, the result of which was already known in advance. And at that moment, the hero agreed to accept the offer of the other professor. The professor bet on Jivan, and he considered him an incredibly talented mage. The professor inquired whether the hero also intended to bet on Jivan, but the hero replied that he was going to bet on Aiden. The professor explained that since they both practiced the practice of spells, how about a contest to record their research? The hero decided to make fun of him since he didn't know that he also taught something similar, but that professor got angry. Aiden was about to apologize to his professor, but he told him that it would be better if he thought about how to achieve victory. The hero said that in battle there is always room for unexpected variables, and he already possessed this variable. Aiden only had to apply it at the right moment. Aiden shouted a request for the professor to prepare him. Once upon a time, a girl told a boy that he couldn't carelessly display what she had taught him. She explained that she also earns a living this way. It did not mean at all that she forbade him to use these techniques, and she ruffled the boy's hair. The girl explained that in life there always comes a moment when he needs to make a choice. Our hero was beside himself. He did not understand what the student had just told him. He made a bet, knowing about his extraordinary abilities, but he claims he wants to win through ordinary skills. The hero rubbed his head and thought that in any case, this was a good opportunity to test his level of preparedness. Finally, the professor agreed and said that their training might seem like real torture to him, plus he did not guarantee him victory. But the guy agreed. Their rivals seemed to be already celebrating victory, and the hero said that they would see what would become of their confident faces in 4 days. After a while, the tired Aiden had already come to his room. He had almost died during that training. It was so difficult. He did not understand why Professor Roger was so confident in him. He practiced not the most traditional magic. Did it mean that he knew something that Aiden did not know? At that time, another professor was thinking that the hero might not show it, but he knew for sure that he desperately wanted to win. He asked Jivan what his goal was, and the blonde replied that he had to strike down this insolent commoner. The professor handed him a vial and said that it was a magical enhancer that needed to be drunk before the battle. The blonde guy took the jar, but he understood that if he was caught, he could be expelled from the academy. The professor explained that the insignificant Aiden uses all sorts of methods to defeat him, so they had to do exactly the same. The blonde man thought that although his honor was slightly offended, he would never give in to Aiden. The next day at the training ground for the magical duel, the students were already actively discussing who could win. They thought that first-year student Aiden also had something to show. Besides, he participated in the capture of the werewolf, but the professor dealt with him, not him. Another professor thought that today he would take Roger Chalici down a peg, and all these people would witness his defeat. At that moment, the rector appeared on the horizon, who had also come to watch the spectacle. She asked how Roger was feeling, and he replied that he was fine. She asked who he had bet on, and our hero replied that he had bet on Aiden. The rector smiled and said that she would look forward to the battle. The guys were wearing protective gear, which contributed to the creation of a barrier responsible for the safety of the wearer. Leo shouted from the stands for Aiden to crush that aristocrat. When the judge approached, he said that before they began, they had to undergo a brief inspection. The man inquired what that sword-like thing hanging at Aiden's side was. He explained that this was his combat weapon, which looks more like a sword, but it's not sharp. As soon as the judge checked everything, he said that the first one whose magic barrier fell from the protective gear would lose. As soon as the start was announced, the guys released magical energy at each other. Aiden noticed that his opponent used the fire element. He knew that Jivan would start with the strongest element. The blonde at that moment thought that the guy was coping better than he had expected, and he would have been at a disadvantage if the amount of his mana did not exceed it many times over. The blonde intensified his energy and shouted for Aiden to know his place. Aiden, in turn, raised a protective magic shield. The guys noticed how Aiden was starting to falter a little. He himself understood that at such a pace he would soon lose, so it was time to apply the technique that Professor Roger had taught him. Aiden rushed straight at the blonde man using a sliding maneuver technique. The professor did not understand how Aiden managed to master the sliding maneuver in just 3 days. No one understood what was actually happening on the battlefield. The blonde thought that concentration was at the core of magic, and if he continued to move so chaotically, it would be difficult for him to focus on manifestation. He cast a spell, and with this he wanted to put an end to his tricks. But Aiden could not be stopped, which is why the blonde failed. Aiden directed a powerful stream of energy straight into the blonde man's forehead. Thus, the judge assured that Aiden became the winner. His friends were shouting from the stands about how cool he was. Jivan's classmates said that he had tarnished the reputation of the aristocrats, and they knew that he could not be relied upon. Jivan himself at that moment could not believe that he had lost. He thought that Aiden had cheated. Otherwise, how else could he have cast a spell while moving? He was going to finish him off and aimed an energy beam straight at Aiden. The students from the stands shouted for Jivan to stop and come to his senses. The energy beams were aimed directly at Aiden and the judge. Suddenly, the guy remembered the words of his former teacher and decided to follow the call of his heart. With one swing of his weapon, Aiden cleaved the stream of fire in half. No one could understand how the guy broke the magic, and only the professor thought that the boy had unhesitatingly used this technique at the most crucial moment. Chris realized that this was a direction that allowed him to nullify the effect of magic. At that moment, Aiden came up and punched the white-haired guy in the face. Aiden clearly did not expect Jivan to be such a bad person. Frayden was also watching the whole scene unfolding in the arena at that time. He explained that he didn't care anyway since he didn't like Jivan from the start, and he decided to keep an eye on Aiden as he had proven his superiority over the aristocrats more than once. Chris turned to the hero and asked if he knew that the student possessed such magic. The reason for the professor's irritation was incomprehensible to the hero. He explained that anti-magic did not affect the outcome of the duel in any way. As the professor left the hall, he bumped into an undercover girl from the cafe, and she congratulated him on his victory. The hero explained to the girl that the rector knew that they had infiltrated Tion, and it would not be easy for him to gain her trust. The hero explained that this was precisely why he decided to make a good impression on the rector by means of a duel. He said that he would need Sedina's help, but their meetings would draw attention until she became a model student. She had to make every effort to reduce the level of suspicion. She promised to do everything possible, even die. But Roger explained that there was no need to die. The girl swore that she would not die even if this mission killed her. The recent event allowed the hero to convince everyone that he was acting in the interests of the Academy, and to make the Black Dawn understand that it could not act recklessly. But the hero understood that this too could not last forever. He had to create his own organization. He was suddenly called by Hans, who said it was time to use heavy artillery. An enraged guy was sitting in one of the bars and fuming about Belfort. They had to think through the next steps for scaling their business. At that moment, our hero entered the bar. They had tried to convey to him that the bar had been closed for a long time, but he wasn't listening. There was Dutry, the leader of the Crimson faction, but he himself saw him for the first time. The hero introduced himself as James Moriarty. He was wearing a tailcoat. The redhead realized that this was the villain consultant, overseeing the criminal system of the Delica Kingdom. He confessed to the hero that his appearance in such a place was too unexpected. The red-haired people aimed the gun at Moriarty, but he felt it with his back and asked them not to shoot in vain. The hero turned around. He was sorry to disappoint them, but the weapon would not help them. The villains realized they couldn't shoot. Something had suddenly happened to their guns. The hero explained that he had warned them. He had already used magic. The red-haired one did not understand how he could apply the silence of fire. At that moment, a huge werewolf appeared in the doorway. He approached the hero and stood next to him. The bandits did not understand how he had managed to tame such a huge beast. Some time ago, Hans told the hero that the criminal district where their hideout is located is divided between 4 criminal organizations, the largest of which is called the Crimson Group. They did the dirtiest work and controlled the entire area. The hero said that it meant they had been their target. He understood that there was some connection between the Crimson faction and Rixen. Hans assumed that they might have been doing Belfort's dirty work for him, and his death had infuriated them terribly. He said that it was not just some gang, they were real mercenaries, and there were even semi-knights among them. After a while, Hans realized that the hero had decided to scare him. He mentally conveyed to the hero that if a fight broke out, the hero could not count on his help. The red-haired man thought, regardless of whether he was the real Moriarty or not, he could not be underestimated. He apologized to the hero for not recognizing him immediately. When the conversation turned to business, the gangster said he would be happy to help him with everything. Here's only the next moment the hero looked at the red-haired man and explained that today he would put an end to the existence of the Crimson Group. The red-haired man hastily ordered to finish off Moriarty and rushed at him himself. The hero passed the information to Hans so that he could prepare for the retreat. He tapped his cane on the floor and the light instantly went out throughout the entire bar. The bandits did not understand what was happening. Someone was saying that they could not see anything and demanded that the lights be turned on. But Moriarty was unyielding. He looked at those present with a murderer's gaze and drew his sword.